Hey everyone, Gravity here. Before the video begins, I simply ask that if you enjoy my content to hit that subscribe button below. Nowhere else on YouTube are you going to find a Battlefield player who's played with teams competitively since Battlefield 1942, nearly 18 years ago. Don't forget to subscribe, and please enjoy the video. Over the nearly 20-year history of the Battlefield franchise, there have been several great maps worthy of praise. A few of these go on to become legendary, icons themselves of the Battlefield series, and appear time and time again through game engine upgrades and subsequent iterations. This is not that story. This is the story of the maps that few want to play, and remember only because they were that bad. Maps which should never be remade. This is the story of the worst maps in Battlefield. With the release of 2042, Battlefield players got their first chance in nigh 20 years to experience some 1942 maps other than Wake Island. Of the two remastered 1942 maps included at launch, Alamein stands out as the biggest disappointment of Battlefield Portal. Pre-launch, DICE called it, as well as the Battle of the Bulge, fan-favorite maps. While Bulge was certainly not a fan-favorite, Alamein was, and in this video you will learn why. But listen, being popular doesn't make a map good. 1942 did not have a lot of good maps in retrospect. Yeah, we played them, and we really enjoyed them, but it's all we had at the time. This map was remade for one reason. It was easy. Alamein is excruciatingly empty, absurdly large, and devoid of any enjoyment value. In short, it's perfect for 2042. 2042 players instantly recognize this. And aside from making a modern version of Silk Road by using Portal's features to dump modern tanks on it, the experience remains the same slow burn. But let's travel back 20 years to the original. Why was such a god-awful map so popular? Alamein is a base game map for Battlefield 1942. One of the largest maps even of that game. It is defined by its vast, empty deserts, numerous tanks, its 3 extremely spaced out flags, no cover, and its aircraft, which featured a rare B-17 appearance on the British side. And when I say empty, I mean more vacant than 2042's quality assurance team. Even by 1942 standards, this map is about as bare bones as you can get. The area of battle consists of 2 terrain types, the flat, sprawling desert wasteland on the right and the mountain range to the left, which runs almost the complete vertical length of the map. Features of Alamein include a few mountain passes for tanks to quickly skirt through, and this oasis in the middle of nowhere, and these buildings, which are practically outside the map. The passes rarely serve as anything other than a shortcut, not to any flags, but to each team's main bases at the 9 and 4 o'clock positions. In fact, on Alamein, the main bases, which are uncapturable, contained most of the map's action, as it sadly possessed the highest proportion of enemy players. The main bases contained an assortment of tanks, mobile artillery, and planes, and stealing enemy vehicles here and going on a chaotic rampage was among the most enjoyable things to do. It had to be, because the flags on the map were the most isolated, laziest, most boring things in possibly the entire franchise. These 3 flags are the North Outpost in the far north of the mountain range, the South Outpost along the range's southern tip, and the East Outpost flag in the desert, just north of the oasis and some rocky terrain. Despite a few lone players trading the northern and southern points, the eastern flag saw the most action, as it was the closest to the British airfield. British tanks from the main base usually came here first to recapture it, while German players used it as a spawn for infantry trying to snipe down the runway, or attempt to zook planes taking off, or to make it to the hangars to kill some oblivious infantry. The flag also featured an AA gun right near the edge of the British runway. So that's cool. While traveling between these flags often felt like it took an eternity, and it does, the positions did not favor either team, as despite the distance, an all-cap could go either way, and each team did have a 2-flag springboard. But each flag is still notoriously simple, small, and the time it takes to travel between them completely ruins the experience. If infiltrating the enemy base, harassing plane campers, or stealing a tank and causing a riot were among the most fun things to do on LL, this then leaves piloting planes on it to be the top tier. Planes on Alamein were beloved. The map was huge, AA guns were minimal, and there was plenty of room to dogfight without interruption. Moreover, the open tan desert and the bland mountain color contrasted the isolated tanks and jeeps moving across it, making them easy pickings. One direct bomb hit could kill most tanks, so actually leaving the bases with one was a fairly miserable and short experience if you were lucky, on top of the often boring drive. And in the main bases, where infantry were plentiful, players stood like statues on the runways waiting for the next plane, and vehicles were constantly rolling out. Assaulting them from the air usually resulted in some serious kill streaks. Finally, if you were on the British side, you also had access to the B-17, which, despite its tank-like survivability and crappy bombs in 2042's Portal mode, was the complete opposite in the original game, being fairly easy to kill, but dropping a devastating payload. It was also exceptionally difficult to fly, particularly for greener players, as it felt like an anvil in the sky and always wanted to pitch up and stall. Nevertheless, 1942's B-17 was a glass cannon capable of annihilating everything on the ground. Seeing German players attempt to steal one off the British runway was a frequent occurrence, and if you were a pilot, the thrill of chasing down a B-17 in the air was a great experience. While the defensive guns may not have been super effective, the B-17 could gain some serious speed and altitude with the proper handling. This particular factor, the dogfighting, and the B-17 gameplay was largely the reason servers for this map existed. Like many 1942 maps, El Alamein was frequently modded to improve player experience. It was destined for vastly higher plane counts, and it became a dogfighting staple. The amazing flight mechanics of the original Battlefield kept this a trend for well over a decade. There is one other reason that El Alamein prevailed in the court of public opinion. While the vanilla map was a dull affair, its size and desert environment made it the perfect choice for one of the most successful FPS mods of all time, Desert Combat. While Desert Combat had an assortment of its own Gulf War-inspired maps, El Alamein fit the mold with minimal alterations, providing enough room for fast tanks, long-range Scud missiles, jets, and helicopters. In the end, what do you call El Alamein? I consider it the equivalent of a failed state, for barely anything about it intentionally works. The flag layout, while balanced, is so devoid of any action or detail or enjoyability that it is truly pointless to play for. The terrain, so barren even for a 1942 map, forces nothing but main base harassment. If you were not a pilot, the entire map boiled down to getting in a jeep, driving all the way to the enemy base, attempting to kill things, dying, and repeating the process for the rest of the round. While El Alamein to Battlefield 1942 fans may have provided hours of fun, it is important to remember why, because the map design had nothing to do with it. It was the freedom of the aircraft on an essentially blank slate, doing your best not to play the objective, and causing as much chaos as you could in a literal sandbox.